Welcome to the Expanding on Consciousness podcast. I am Mark Serto, and I'm very excited to continue my conversation with the sons of Don Miguel Ruiz. Don Miguel Sr. was known as the keeper of the Toltec tradition and was the author of the book The Four Agreements. It's a book which expanded upon the writings of Carlos Castaneda and put the teaching stories that Castaneda told into a practicum for life. His son, Don Jose, and I spoke in the season opener, and he gave us a wonderful historical overview of how the tradition was kept alive during the time of suppression, and shared with us also his personal journey of embodying these teachings of the tradition, which led to his writing the Fifth Agreement. Don Jose also brought to light the connection between the Quetzalcoatl and the deities who act as a mediating principle between above and below. Deities which did so by walking through the darkness and attaining the light. That's a very common theme in the story of consciousness, and it's expressed in just about every religion. This walk through the dark to attain the light is a function of consciousness, and it speaks to something very deep in the human psyche, something which reflects an inherent desire to transcend something, that which might be called the ego, which is part of our ordinary nature, and move into something of a higher nature. This is a necessary part of what's called the great work of our evolution as a species, and if we engage it, rather than ridicule it or dispel it as unnecessary, it helps expand our consciousness. It helps us to shift into something which technology will not help us do. My guest today expands upon the teachings of Toltec and contributes his own practicum to the mastery of life. Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. is also a teacher, a writer, and an artist who uses life as his palette. Like his father before him, his books, The 5 Levels of Attachment and The Mastery of Self, have enjoyed great success worldwide and provide a unique wisdom and food for a hungry soul. Don Miguel, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's an honor to be in your program. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Pleasure's mine and the honor's mine, sir. So last week I got a chance to speak with Don Jose, and we covered quite a lot about your father's work and your continuation of it. I'm learning an awful lot about Toltec, and I'm very interested to learn even more. I'm very interested, however, in your personal journey as well. So if you don't mind, why don't we start there?
Okay, sounds good.
So,
what would you like to know?
Well, I know that you come from a long line of shamans who practiced in a predominantly Catholic culture, and we know that in Mexico, Catholicism is very deeply rooted now. What was your experience like being part of two cultures at that time?
Wow, you hit it right in the head, because that's exactly what my experience was. I dealt a lot with dualities and juxtapositions. So it's almost my experience in my journey that's all I've ever experienced. I've never had one way is the right way type of thing. It's always been a multi-layered or several channels. Like, for example, it's like, just to put it, simplify, I was born and raised in San Diego, California, and I commuted every day to go to school in Tijuana. So I lived in San Diego, but I went to school in Tijuana till my 11th grade.
I see.
I did live in Tijuana for some time during my elementary school years, but I continued to go to school in Tijuana. Mm-hmm. So right off the bat, just with that, I grew up with the duality or juxtaposition of two different cultures. One where you speak Spanish, the other one where you speak English, the one a third world country, the other one is a main world power. The other one is very conservative. The other one was very liberal. And ironically, I'm describing San Diego as a liberal town as opposed to Tijuana. Right. Turns out, looking back, I'm like, oh, it's more conservative than I thought. I grew up in a family of spiritual healers, yet I also lived in a place that was Catholic. Mm-hmm. But the contrast wasn't that. The contrast was academia. You know, my grandmother being a spiritual faith healer, and my father, Don Miguel, my uncles, my aunts, being medical doctors, neurosurgeons, oncologists, psychiatrists, general practitioners, Western medicine and ancient spiritual philosophy. So for me, that one right there was the main contrast, as opposed to, like, I was already used to the dualities of two cultures, of even not just the two cultures of what you can find in Chicano Park and Tijuana, but also the everyday life of pop culture. It's like the music. You
Right.
listen to. I grew up listening to the Beatles and the Stones, but they also have Vicente Fernandez and Juan Gabriel growing up, and this Jose Alfredo Jimenez. But
Right.
the thing that was predominant was the academia, because I went to school in a place called the International Baccalaureate. And in academia, I still, to certain days, I read history books and physics books, and I rarely read spiritual books. I don't touch them, to be honest with you. I've read very few spiritual authors. I can tell you I've only read one Carlos Castaneda books. I've not read any more. The Paulo Coelho is probably the only spiritual author that I've read the most. I've read several of his books. I really enjoy them, but I read history books. I read physics books. I had to read a lot of physics before I can even attempt at Hawkins. To be able to understand Hawkins' writings and theories.
Right.
So I'm more interested in that, and that goes in the duality of things. So I had a spiritual teacher that is my grandma Sarita. When people say I follow in my father's footsteps, I have to correct them. Like, nope. My father, my brother Jose Luis, and myself, all three of us, including my cousins and Tere and people like that, we all follow my grandmother's passion. She is, even though she passed away in 2008, she is still the spiritual head of this family, my grandma Sarita. So she is the one who had the desire and the joy of sharing the family tradition outside of the family. Her father, Don Leonardo, her grandfather, Don Ezequiel, only taught to select few. The shadow of the taboo of the Holy Inquisition was still there.
Right.
But I talk about dualities. When you talk about Catholicism in Mexico, yes, you have the traditional Franciscan and Jesuit, but there's another mixture that happens in Mexico. The most famous example is La Virgen de Guadalupe.
Right.
La Virgen de Guadalupe is the mixture, the fusion of Mother Mary with Tonatzin. Tonatzin is the mother goddess in the Mesoamerican traditions.
Right.
In the Aztec and other civilizations that existed in the Valle of Mexico. The Basilica of Guadalupe is right now in Mexico City, sits on top of the temple of Tonatzin. So you can say a lot of the saints in Mexico used to have Nahuatl names. That's the thing about colonialism. With the expansion of the Catholic Church with the Holy Inquisition, a lot of the traditions had to go underground.
Right.
And by, however it was, this is more history here. Either by the church, or there was a meeting of the priests of the church and the spiritual heads of what remained of the Aztec priest, and trying to convert the Native Americans, the Mesoamericans, to Catholicism and how to swing. So in this meeting, and mind you, forgive me, my memory is a little fuzzy. I have to try to remember this, but they're trying to broaden the image and love of Christ, Catholicism. And what the priest simply did was just change the names, to a certain degree.
Right.
And a lot of the traditions that existed pre-Columbus kept existing but it's just under a new name. An example of traditions like that is the Day of the Dead.
Right.
The Day of the Dead is an adaptation of the traditions that existed in Mesoamerican culture, but it had its resonance and Catholicism, and you still see it. You still see these beautiful cultures fuse, and my family is no exception. We are the fusion of it. It's like Jose tells a story about someone telling him like, your shamanic tradition has so much Catholic. I'm like, yeah, of course, we're colonized, we're conquered, but we still found a way to teach. So my grandmother, when she taught us Catholicism, and my other grandmother as well, it's like on my mother's side is Olmec, on my father's side is Toltec,
Okay.
the Chichimeca side of things, Aztec side of things as well. But these are all traditions that even many traditions around the world that had to face the dealings of colonialism had to deal with the way of continuing to teach their tradition, but put it under a different name. Especially during the whole Inquisition, a lot of things had to go underground, and not just Mesoamerican, but in Europe, a lot of things had to go underground, and they're still celebrated.
Yeah, all the pagan religions that were predominant in Europe before Catholicism took hold, and also within the I'm thinking about the Celtic religions. Were also
exactly. I was thinking exactly that too, of course.
Right.
But of course, that's not my tradition. That's more like from what I read in books, and did it happen the way I think it happened?
Right.
I was born in like Jose says, I was born in 1975. And I only know up until anything that happened before that is a story.
Right, exactly.
That's what I have.
Well, who kept the story alive? It sounds like Madre Sarita took the position on, held the tradition alive. Was that true of the ladies in Mesoamerica who were familiar with the shamanic tradition?
It was true depending on the family. In our family, it's a matriarch. The head of the family is still to this day, like even though she passed away, my grandma Sarita is still the head.
Right.
So it's like a Madre Anita was before her.
Right.
But in teaching, the first one that I know of to say that we're Toltec is my great-great-grandfather, Don Ezequiel Macias, my grandmother's grandfather. He was born in the 1830s. He's the first Mexican in the family. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that, he was the first Mexican in that lineage of my bloodline to be born post-Mexican independence. What do Mexicans call themselves before Mexican independence? Mm-hmm. It depends on the region. Some people call themselves subjects to the king. I asked this to a lot of people and journalists who knew a little bit of historians, like some saw themselves as subjects to the king, because it was La Nueva España, the New Spain. Some identified themselves as their tribal. So there was not a unison. It was invented past, kind of like the Americans, U.S. citizens, what do they call themselves pre-1776?
Sure, right.
What would they call themselves, would they call themselves Americans? They definitely didn't call themselves U.S. citizens.
Pilgrims,
they call themselves pilgrims. But is that true of every single one of the colonies? That's 13 colonies. They all call themselves pilgrims.
Right.
Are we just describing one colony or two colonies?
Right.
And most likely we are only describing those two.
Right.
And that's the question. I was also like, when I say my Don Ezequiel is the first Mexican, is the first one to be born with that national identity that is quite modern. U.S. citizen, Mexican citizen, French citizen, even after the French Revolution. Anyways, I don't know Don Ezequiel's parents' name. So that's why I have to go. That's the thing about oral tradition. It goes as far as living memory.
Right.
Did they call themselves Toltecs? The answer is I don't know, because I don't have the answer. The answer that I have is Don Ezequiel saying we're the first ones, that we're Toltec. Now, mind you, when we say Toltec, the word Toltec is a Nahuatl word that means artist in English. If I translate the phrase, the Toltec art of transformation, into 100% English, it means the artist path of transformation. I am an artist. So when we say I'm a Toltec, I'm really saying in English, 100%, I am an artist. You could take it with a grain of salt if he's referring to the culture of the Toltec civilization that existed before the Aztec Empire, that they say that they're the descendants of the Teotihuacan, according to legend. Mm-hmm. Or is he referring to the artist? I could be fanatical about it and say, no, it's the culture, this or the artist. But I don't know. I didn't meet him. I only had the stories.
Right.
Have you ever seen a movie called The Milagro Beanfield War?
Yes.
If you've seen this movie, then you know the famous character of the trickster, the one with the big hat. And well, Don Ezequiel was the trickster. He was a carpenter by trade, but he taught the tradition in his own unique way. He is that, him and his friend Gándara. These are the stories my uncles, Don Leonardo, my uncle Nacho, and my grandmother Sarita would tell of him, just like him and Gándara teaching and being tricksters. You know, the stories of if you grab a leaf from the tree and turn it into money and says spend it quickly before it turns back into a leaf, and they go off and spend it and they would have leaf. You know, is that true? Did it really happen? I don't know. For me, it's just a story that Don Leonardo, my uncle Leo taught us, and Uncle Nacho did as well. And my aunt Angelita laughed and she says, "Yes, I remember that." And my abuelita Sarita saying, "That's how you tell stories of the ancient ones, through living memory." So Don Ezequiel was the trickster. He was the shaman that in his youth was a carpenter. As far as I know, if he was more than that, I don't know. But by the end of his life, he lived to be 116 years of age.
Wow.
So in his later half of his life, and that could be from the 50s onwards, which is a good 60 years, or less than, of course, he was the graveyard caretaker. You know, he's the one who took care of the graveyard in Juanacatlan, Jalisco, which is the small little town.
Right.
And it was there that he taught the tradition to his apprentices, which a handful is like he only taught it to the people who, with the shadow of the Holy Inquisition, it was still taboo to talk about anything outside of the Catholic Church. So La Virgen de Guadalupe being the Catholic version of Tonatzin, that kind of stuff.
Right.
You know, those little secrets, those little tales, you know, the stories of the two-headed giant sleeping in the Valle of Mexico and things like that.
Right.
Of course, we're talking about Teotihuacan there. Here's a tradition in the family. The tradition in the family is that we rebel against the tradition. We try to do our own thing. It's a tradition that my Don Leonardo did, my grandmother Sarita did, my father did, and my Jose and I did. We all tried to be in our modern day. And Don Leonardo was born in the 1880s, a good 50 years after Don Ezequiel was born, give or take a few years. I was able to find Don Leonardo's birth certificate when I went to Juanacatlan, but the thing about the Juanacatlan municipality is that they only started collecting birth certificates after 1882-81, which means anything before that you have to find it in the Catholic Church, in the church archives. You know, you can say that's the how long it took for Mexican independence and the La Reforma, which is Mexico's civil war, to catch on and modernize itself. You know, the Porfiriato, the Porfirio Diaz days, the dictatorship. So I couldn't find Don Ezequiel's birth certificate, but I found Don Leonardo, so I know he existed. He was a soldier, and during the Porfiriato, during the dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz, but he was also a musician. So it was through music that he taught the Toltec tradition. You know, nowadays, I'm able to decipher some of Don Leonardo's exercises. Like, for example, the discipline side of our tradition comes from Don Leonardo. An example would be, in order to learn where does your attention go, how to focus your attention. Right. Don Leonardo would have his apprentice listen to a piece of orchestra, music played in orchestra. Back then, That's what you had. You didn't have CDs or digital recordings the way we have now. You had to wait until a band played it.
Right.
So he would have the apprentice focus her own attention on one instrument while the orchestra played the song. If he got distracted by the sound of the voice, if he got distracted by a different thing, his attention wasn't there. She had to learn how to keep the focal attention on that one instrument during the duration of the song. Mm-hmm. And that's how my great grandfather taught meditation.
Right.
The focal point of how to concentrate your attention.
Mm-hmm. On one thing amidst all the cacophony of everything else.
Exactly.
Yes.
But the taboo of the Holy Inquisition was still there. So he only taught to select few. Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's Don Ezequiel and Don Leonardo, two shamans. And mind you, I'm just using the word shaman so that audience has a referral point. They call themselves Nahual.
Nahual.
That's the phrase. Okay. We don't call ourselves shamans, really. That's more of a, all right, how can I explain to you what we are? Well, the closest thing you have is shaman, so we'll use shaman. But
what does the word Nahual translate to in English?
Nahual has three meanings: a spiritual teacher, a spiritual guide, but the one we use the most is in physics. In order for an object to move, there needs to be a force that moves that object. Mm-hmm. Let's use that image. Mm-hmm. In order for an object to move, there needs to be a force that moves that object. If I use the little nahuatl here, that object is called tonal. Tonal is matter. My body is matter.
Right.
Nahual is the energy that animates the tonal.
I see the connection. I totally see the connection there. Yeah.
Yeah. So my body is tonal. The energy that moves it is Nahual. And it's a shapeshifter because it has no form. Life has no form. It adapts itself to that object it animates.
I really want to delve into all of that. I learned a lot of the history of your family through Don Jose, and everything that you just reiterated is beautifully done, and I want to thank you for it. But I'm very, very interested in your personal journey to becoming Nahual.
Well, it goes with the next in line, which is Madre Sarita. Ironically, your question goes through that.
Right.
Madre Sarita, she is the one that she rebelled against it. She was born in 1910, and she rebelled against the tradition by being modern. She was born in the year the Mexican Revolution broke. So you can say it's modern Mexico, the one that we know now.
Sure.
With post Mexican Revolution. So she was born in 1910. Her teenage years are the Roaring 20s and the 1930s.
Right.
And she became, a full-fledged adult by World War II.
Right.
She has an epiphany, an aha moment that she couldn't explain, and she went back to the tradition. Mm-hmm. And she became a faith healer because she got sick. The family took her to a faith healer. She had an experience she could not explain, what we now know as an out-of-body experience or spiritual awakening. Mm-hmm. She went to the only person she trusted, which was Don Leonardo at this time, and she became a faith healer. Now, here's the thing. This is why she is the head of the family. She is the firecracker. She is the fire. Mm-hmm. She did not care about the taboo of the Holy Inquisition. For her, that is just ancient history. I want to share this with everyone because look at what it did for me. It can help others too.
Right.
So she spent the rest of her life in gratitude. That's the thing about this. Her rebellion ended when she was grateful for her health because it brought her back. And she was so grateful she continued to share it. Mm-hmm. So Madre Sarita arrives in the 1940s. My dad was born in Guadalajara, but in the 1950s, he is raised in Tijuana. So people call him Tijuana because he's from there.
Right.
But my grandmother is in full swing spiritual teachings, leaving behind her old world and slowly opening up a temple in Tijuana. And that happens mostly in the 1960s. Mm-hmm. Back then, the border wasn't what we know now. It's just people just crossed.
Sure.
No problem.
Right.
She crossed, no problem. And she settled in Barrio Logan. And a lot of her family settled. When she passed away, she was a U.S. citizen. Mm-hmm. But at that point, she opened up a small little temple in Barrio Logan. But before that, or around that time, she was also hired by the state of California to be a faith healer. So she had a temple in Tijuana. She had a temple in San Diego. She let go of the temple in Tijuana. Because I vaguely remember that little temple. Mm-hmm. But she taught mostly in San Diego. And she worked for Casa Familiar in San Isidro. In the 1970s and 80s and beginning of the 1990s, her little temple, Nueva Vida, was there. And it was there that she taught the Toltec tradition to anyone who wanted to hear it. From Monday to Friday, she did healings. And on Thursdays and Sundays, she did the cátedras, which is basically the sermons. Mm-hmm. She shared it. I say this because this is in Barrio Logan. That's my first home. When I was born in 1975, Barrio Logan was my first home. Mm-hmm. That's where I was taken from the hospital. What they brought home from the hospital, and that was my first home. My grandmother was in full-fledged spiritual teacher mode. At the time, she was known as Hermana Sarita, Sister Sarita. Okay. Eventually, she became Madre Sarita, Mother Sarita. Mm-hmm. In 2007, she was inducted into the San Diego Women's Hall of Fame for keeping the tradition alive. Mm-hmm. Now, my journey starts here in answering that old question.
Right.
When I was 14 years old, my father, he gave us the initiation ceremony for me and my brother. My brother, if I was 14, my brother was about 11 or 12. And we went to a place called Madre Grande, which is in Cuyamaca, just heading towards Tecate.
Okay.
Madre Grande. It's one of the little hills over there. My father says to me, when you finish college, I will really intensify your apprenticeship. But in the meantime, you will apprentice to Madre Sarita, mm-hmm. my grandmother. So my responsibility as an apprentice, and this is where my journey can say begins, is that I had to translate everything she says. I have to translate her sermons, her cátedras. I have to translate her one-on-ones because my grandmother did not speak any English. She spoke Spanish. Mm-hmm. I translated her prayers. I translated her consultations. I translated her healings. I translated everything because in real time.
Right. And you're 14 now, right? You're 14.
Yeah, I was 14 years old. She would slow down at first, but eventually she just kept going, Right. So the queue of things I had to translate just increased. And I got to the point where I would lose her because I had to say it right. I had to get it done right.
Right.
And by the time I finished translating what she needed to say, she was ahead of me. So I had to cut corners because I didn't know what she said.
Right.
At first she was slow, but when she got speed, once she got inspired, she would just go.
Right.
After years, a couple of years, 16 years old, she sat me down and she says, do you now know why you're having such a difficult time translating for me? And I said, Grandma, you're going too fast. You don't give me time. You have to say it slow, pause, and then for me. She says, are you using knowledge or is knowledge using you? Which I had no idea what that meant.
Right.
As now I know. And she went on to say, here's what I want you to do. When you translate for me, the voice inside your head is mine, because what's happening is that you're hearing me, you're putting it into your own voice, and you're translating it from your own voice, which means at one point you stop listening to me, you're listening to yourself.
Right.
And it has to be perfect according to your point of view. But when that happens, you're no longer paying attention. I want you to hear my voice inside your head. My voice is there. When you open your mouth, it's going to come out in English because you already know it.
Yes.
You know the language. You don't need to translate it in your head because you already know it.
And you're, in a sense, becoming a transducer.
Yes.
Connecting with her on one level, allowing her to move through you, and you are like the cavity of a guitar resonating with the vibration of the guitar string that was plucked, her being the guitar string and the vibration. And that, okay.
Yep, which means she's teaching me how to meditate.
Right.
This is how she taught me how to be present. She says, imagine spending your whole life translating every experience to a language you know.
Right.
You're going to miss out on life.
Right.
Imagine explaining and translating a kiss, a hug.
Right.
You're wasting your time paying attention on what does that kiss mean instead of the experience of the kiss.
Right. And in that teaching, she got you completely involved in the tradition and through direct experience.
Yep. And by the end of it, by the end of my apprenticeship, she and I was able to translate her word by word.
That's wonderful.
We're both, she's saying Spanish, I was saying it in English. And the only thing is that I would hear the first few letters of the word, because of course I knew her at this point.
Right.
But I was able to translate it. I had to forego grammar, it's backwards.
Sure.
It's Spanish is just, I had to surrender that, take out the English grammar, just translate the words.
Right.
Let the recipient edit it and put it in order.
Right.
You have to let go of that. But I was able to translate for her in real time. And that's how she taught me how to meditate. Looking back, that's Don Leonardo's exercise.
Right.
That's
with the
Don
orchestra.
Leonardo's.
Right. Exactly.
At the orchestra. She was doing Don Leonardo's teaching.
Yeah.
And it took me years to realize that's what she was doing. She was teaching me Don Leonardo's teaching, not through music, but through her prayers, through her faith.
And that's how it's done. We're going to take a quick break here, Don Miguel. When we come back, I want to pick up on your journey. We'll be back in just a minute.
Expanding on Consciousness is brought to you by the Monroe Institute, a nonprofit organization and leader in consciousness education and research, teaching you how to actively explore and use expanded states of consciousness, providing direct experiences that are deeply personal, uniquely meaningful, and life-changing. Monroe has been helping people create more meaningful and joyful lives through the guided exploration of expanded consciousness for 50 years. Gain the knowledge and understanding you seek to create the life you desire. Learn more about where to start your journey to expanded awareness with Monroe. Visit monroeinstitute.org or check out our Expand Meditation app, available on the App Store or Google Play.
You had tremendous responsibility. You had to hold the psychic tension between cultural differences, religious practices, and you assimilated it beautifully by becoming your grandmother's word as she was speaking in a whole different language without getting your head involved, which to me was very intense. And as I'm listening to your story, I'm also reminded of something that I read on your website as I was doing my research. You did your apprenticeship for 10 years. And when you reached your mid-20s, your father intensified your training. I'm quoting from your website. At the apex of this power journey, Don Miguel said to his eldest son, you, find your way out, go home, and master death by becoming alive. Right.
Yep.
I smiled.
I graduated college.
Right. I smiled a lot when I read that because it sounded to me like the beginning of a hero's journey. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Did your father sending you on a desert walk in your 20s resemble this notion, or was it something different?
Well, it was in Teotihuacan. He said that at the top of the Pyramid of the Sun.
So he delivered this to you at the Pyramid of the Sun. Wow.
Yeah. So at the apex of my journey, I was 24. Yeah, 24. I was 24 years old, not 23, 24 years old. Wow. I graduated college when I was 23 in 1999. My dad's prediction came true. He intensified it. All of a sudden, he says, okay, now that you don't need your mind as much, your memory, I'm going to intensify it. We went to Peru. I had some very powerful moments. I had such a severe stomach ache. And he just had me lay down on the stone as he was teaching in Machu Picchu. And it was such a painful pain. The sun came, he taught, I closed my eyes, I took a breath, and the pain went away. All of a sudden, I got up, I had this jolt of energy, and I was literally just hopping and skipping. But I was still in play mode. I was still not taking seriously. What happens when you are raised in a family full of spiritual teachers? You learn all the loopholes. You learn all the loopholes. You somehow convince yourself this is in your blood. You don't have to do any of the homework. It's in your blood. And going once again with the fanatical side, I once dated a girl whose mother was someone who went to my grandmother's teachings quite a bit. One day I was hanging out with my girlfriend. Her mom came in with a headache and she said, Miguel, can you please put your hand on my head so my headache would go away? And I'm going, That was my first experience with that kind of thing. So I had a group of people who would try to reinforce that mentality, like, oh, it's in my blood. I don't have to do anything. I'm a Ruiz.
Sure. Right.
Worst lie you can ever tell yourself. Or at least I told myself.
Right.
I don't have to do anything. I don't have to do any of the work. It's in my blood. All I have to do is just think about it. Big mistake. I was wrong about that. And here I go. That was in Peru in 1999. A few months later, literally just a few months later, he took me to Teotihuacan. He shifted my assemblage point. You know, some people look for it for all their lives. They look for that one thing, they go, and everything shifts.
Right.
Right? Most people look for, that's the reason why people take peyote or things like that. They want the automatic something.
The
right?
quick fix.
The quick, aha. And not everyone, of course. The peyote and all those wonderful medicines are sacred.
Yes.
Done in the right thing, they can change your life in such a beautiful way because they will bring down your filter so fast. It's like in Teotihuacan is the eagle of the Titla. The truth. It's merciless. It's ruthless.
Right.
She, as I refer to her as she, peyote and ayahuasca.
Right.
I refer to her as she because I've met her. I've never taken either one, but I've met her.
You met the spirit behind it. Right.
She is ruthless in truth, and is the representation of the eagle of the Titla in our culture. That's how I know her. The Titla. She will show you your truth without any filter. All right.
And so your father changed your assemblage point and...
Without any drugs or anything.
Right. Nothing.
It was a ceremony. You can say my grandmother had been teaching me because you can almost describe the meditation she was teaching me is to be not just clairvoyant, but a clear channel.
Yes.
She always taught me that you have to come in with discipline. Once again, Don Leonardo.
Right.
And a little bit of Don Ezekiel here.
And being able to hear the one instrument amidst the cacophony of noise.
Yeah, exactly. You cannot bring your distortion into that world because if you haven't healed that,
right,
you're bringing it into that world and it'll make you force it.
Yes.
You have to be a clean channel. And my grandmother was a disciplinarian that way. She believed that you can reach ayahuasca or peyote without ever taking it through your breath. It's what we now know as breath work. Imagine some of the most deepest experiences I've had in my life is from doing breath work.
Right.
It's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, my father shifted my assemblage point in the top of the pyramid of the sun, and I was acting as if I was stoned for several days. I had to relearn. It's like seeing life without a filter, seeing life as is. And you hit such a high point of seeing life. You can feel everything around you. I could feel the tree, when it needed me. Like I was sitting there in the backyard of the house, and I felt this tree, and it felt like it was in pain. So I got up and I'm like, what do you need? Without thinking, I realized it was tied. It had this rope that it was tying it, and the limb was fluctuating. So I untied it, and I could feel its relief. I felt that.
Mm-hmm.
I had a communion with a tree.
Yes.
Okay. As you re-enter the day of the dream, the dream of the planet, you slowly, without even aware, you still think you're in that point, but you're slowly leaving it. And you still think you're there, but you're leaving it. You're going down, 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 down. Yeah. You still think you're there, but no, you're not. You're really engaging. You're down, down. All of a sudden, you find yourself all the way down. As all of a sudden you're trying your best to get back in the back, and you lost it. And you don't know how you lost it, but you little by little by little until you crash. My biggest heartbreak was realizing that I wasn't who I pretended to be. The image of Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. Mind you, I didn't call myself Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. Miguel Ruiz Jr. Did not exist.
Right.
There's no such thing as faking it till you make it. There's no such thing as that. Your truth is always with you. It's kind of like running. When you run, there's no faking it till you make it. Your truth on that day of that run, of that race. I've run 6 marathons and 25 half marathons. There's no such thing as faking it till you make it in running. Your truth of what you're able to do is what's happening on that day. Mm-hmm. That's your truth.
Right.
So on that day, little by little, I tried my best to go back into my old dream, and it didn't fit. My dad had his heart attack. I lost someone I loved, and I could not project blame. She did nothing wrong. It was all me. It's like the freight train that finally derailed because it was just the tracks it was on was all an illusion.
Right.
And I had to start again. The 4 agreements came out when I was 21 years old. I bought it. My dad gave me his copy, but I wanted to read the copy I bought. And I put the book down at chapter 3 because it was my dad telling me what to do all over again. When I was going through this, and I had major heartbreak, and the heartbreak was not only that I lose someone I loved very much, but I realized I wasn't what I pretended to be. And that's the situation with domestication and conditioning. Conditional love only sees what it wants to see. Unconditional love is the willingness to see life as is. I had experienced unconditional love in the moment my assemblage point shifted. And little by little, conditional love came crawling back in. I went from practicing the 4 agreements to practicing the 4 conditions. Mm-hmm. People used to ask me which one of the 4 agreements was the hardest one for you to practice. And I used to say being impeccable with the word or taking things personal. And then after a while, I realized the reason why they're so difficult, it was because I was pretending to be a man who was impeccable with his word and did not take things personal. That was a lie. If you understand this concept, and I realized I was using the 4 agreements as an instrument of domestication. Mm-hmm. The telltale sign that I do is judging myself for taking things personal, judging myself for making assumptions, judging myself for the rest of it. And that's how I turned the 4 agreements into the 4 conditions. Mm-hmm. I was doing that. I was doing that with my tradition, with everything my grandmother taught me and everything my father would taught me. And I had to start anew. And I had to start it from the beginning. There's no such thing as a loophole. I'm just cheating myself of doing the work. So I had to start anew, which means even though I started my apprenticeship at the age of 14, I didn't really start it till I was 27, 28 years old. No, 27. I didn't date for a year. Luckily, I was able to heal enough to meet my wife at the age of 28. And since then, life has just been teaching me. Because up to that point, whenever I touched the Four Agreements, it was like a cover band. I was teaching my father, but little by little, I added my own experiences. And here I am, 6 books later. They all came not from repeating what my father taught me. Yes, I teach the essence of what my father teaches and my grandmother teaches us, but it all came from the experiences life taught me. Life became my teacher, and life teaches me to the consequences of my own actions.
You mastered death by dying. You mastered life by becoming yourself and self-actualizing in a new way. Mm-hmm. You could not have done so without dying.
And here's the thing. To go beyond fear is to come to peace with fear.
Yes.
To no longer abuse fear the way we abuse alcohol and drugs. Fear, the function of fear is to keep you safe. Fear will secrete a hormone that allows you to survive through fight, flight, or freeze.
Cortisol.
It's a normal thing.
Right.
We can abuse that the way we abuse alcohol and drugs. Example, and I usually use this example a lot, a movie theater. Mm-hmm. Watch a movie, a horror movie, and you will experience all three. Mm-hmm. But you're completely safe. It's just light being projected onto a screen with a very good sound system. Mm-hmm. And if the movie is good, you will completely forget that you're in a room, completely safe. You will experience the fight, which is the scream, mm-hmm. the flight, which is putting your fingers in your ears and closing your eyes and humming, or freezing, which is when you can't move because you're petrified. They're all real responses to fear, but what's triggering is not real. Mm-hmm. It's just a movie. Well, the mind is more powerful than any movie projector. It projects all the what ifs and answers it with a worst case scenario. And I'm giving myself fear, mm-hmm. false evidence appearing real.
That's right.
To come to peace with fear is to go beyond fear, is to come to peace with fear, to respect it once again, and forgive yourself for ever abusing it in the first place. Just in the same way, the best way to let go of conditional love is to forgive yourself for ever saying yes to it in the first place. Mm-hmm. And that's my understanding. My grandmother's teachings, faith, believing in something 100% is knowing full well that I can do it without a doubt.
Well, you were raised with a lot of responsibility, my friend, to mm-hmm. carry on decades, generations of a tradition and be tasked with it at such a young age, and then be told, okay, now it's time for you to not be an apprentice anymore. Now you have to go die and master life.
Yeah, and I still see myself as a translator because I'm translating my dad and my brother, putting in what they're teaching is in the same words. That's why we're teaching the same thing. But I'm also translating my own words, putting it into words that others can understand. Yes. Talk about the things you know. If you don't know it, don't talk about it. And that's the thing. It's like my greatest teachers are my kids, my wife, my family, the barista at the coffee shop, mm-hmm. life. Every consequence, everything has something to teach you. The thing is, you got to get yourself out of your own way to hear it.
You're talking about the mastery of self.
Yep.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your book, your own words, your contribution to the tradition mm-hmm. and your own journey.
Yeah.
How are you defining the self? Give us a clue as to what it means to master a self. First of all, how do you define the self? Which self are we talking about?
Well, first thing is the moment you stop pretending to be something you're not for the sake of someone else's point of view. Mm-hmm. It is the moment you accept yourself just the way you are. Mm-hmm. You accept both the yin and yang. You accept the shadow self as much as the light self. It is the moment where I realize I am alive. Mm-hmm. I'm the sum of every decision that I've ever made. At the same time, I'm the youngest I will ever be. Mm-hmm. This is me. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. My body exists because I exist. I don't take my body with me at the moment of my last heartbeat or breath. I am not this body. I'm the force that animates it.
Right.
My grandmother taught me that when she died. My uncle Duke taught me that when he died. I don't take this body with me. I am not this body. If you understand this concept, I'm also not this mind. My mind exists because I exist.
Right.
I am the force that animates it. If you understand this concept, then you also understand this. My love exists because I exist. My fear exists because I exist. I am life. And I'm a shapeshifter because life has no shape. Everyone will see me as unique as they see me. I am the constant in every relationship that I am in. Every relationship will bring a totally different element of me. My wife will see me as she sees me. My daughter will see me as she sees me. My mom will see me as she sees me. All three women of my life will see me from their own unique point of view, yet I am the constant in their relationship. The reason why I look different to all of them is that they bring out a different element of me in each time I react to them, and I'm authentic with all of them. Who am I? What am I? I have no idea, but I know that I am. I'm alive. And the irony is that I was born into a body that lives life from a single point of perception that's narrowed by the perception of my nervous system, my eyes, my ears, every single nerve ending. But this energy that animates it is the same life that gives life to every single being in this planet and everything that exists. I am life.
You are the subtle underlying cause of the entire universe.
Yeah. So from that point of view is that when did my life start?
Right.
And my life started long before my conception because there was life in the sperm and there was life in the ovum. And long before my grandparents and great-grandparents, to the point where every I life started a long time ago. I life. But the irony is that I have to use my imagination to see that. I'm using and viewing life from the unique point of view of a nervous system that sees it as an individual among 7.5 billion, maybe 8 billion by now. Who am I? What am I? Every word is an empty symbol whose definition is subject to agreement. Any word I give it will have a definition that I agree to.
Mm-hmm.
So if I give myself an identity, a symbol that others would understand, then it's going to be unique to the individual that understands it.
Right.
If I say self or my authentic self, it's just a symbol.
That's it.
A symbol that can be used to describe the being that animates this body, but it's still just a symbol. Let me put it this way. The tree of knowledge is the perfect reflection of the tree of life. There is no two trees. It's only one. The other is an illusion, a clean reflection. When it's corrupted, it distorts the truth. When it's a clean reflection, it reflects the truth, but it's still just a reflection. So what's the truth? The organism we call a tree, or the word tree? The organism. What's the truth? My definition of self or the experience of self? The experience. Of course, I'm going to do my very best to put it into words so that others can understand me, because that's the beauty of language, of knowledge. In fact, that's the whole thing. It's a bridge that allows us to understand each other. It's the bridge that allows us to see it from someone else's point of view. But just like a songwriter writes his or her or their song, as soon as it's out there, its interpretation is no longer yours. It is that of the receptor, the one who listens.
I would add one more thing to that. It is also the thing that allows relationship to occur.
Exactly.
I wish the audience could have just witnessed what I witnessed on video, but we're doing this on audio, so that my audience understands what I've just witnessed. Is I witnessed a channeling of truth in real time. And I hope that the relationship between my new friend Don Miguel and myself and all of you listening can hear and feel on some level the truth of what has just occurred. I know it's truth because I could see it and hear it with my own eyes and ears. In your being, I felt it in my being. I'm hoping that everybody listening can feel it in their being. Your observation about the tree of life and the tree of knowledge, too, is profound. We could probably talk about that for about 3 hours. I'm sure we could talk about several things, but I want to talk just a little bit more about, well, thank you. That was a profound moment for me.
Thank you for witnessing, Mark. Appreciate it.
I could not help but witness it. It was palpable, and I'm hoping everybody else experienced it as well. The work that you're presenting is a practicum.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about healing work through what we'll loosely call shamanism.
Mm-hmm.
It's an artistry. The mastery of life is an artistry. The transmission of that wisdom in real time, and you exemplified it beautifully just now, as if I heard your grandmother speak. Put it that way, in that moment, okay? I could see where your apprenticeship was applied. You've learned it. You've mastered it. Beautifully done. The work of healing in shamanism is speaking to a healing of that duality, that schism. I'm projecting. These are my words, not yours. I want to see if I've got this correct. Is that what we're talking about that is in need of healing? That space between the relationship of the subject-object split that words present, that mirrors the dream, both on a personal and impersonal level. Is that what we're talking about healing here?
Yeah. I'm still doing the same work my grandmother does. That's what we're doing. We're healing. The 4 agreements, in particular, being impeccable with the word, don't take things personal, don't make assumptions, and the 5th agreement, be skeptical but learn to listen. These 4 agreements, if you see it from this scope, from this lens, their job is to heal, not just to heal the wounds that conditional love left in your heart, but is there to clean the channels of communication. What does that word mean to you? Don't make the assumption that we all use the same meaning.
Right.
For example, it's like the expression, do you believe in God? The answer is yes, but that's the wrong question.
Mm-hmm.
What is your definition of God? And all of a sudden we realize that we're both saying yes to 2 totally different things, but the symbol is the same. Some people will see God as Great Zeus, and some people will see the Great Spirit and the full spectrum in between just those 2 definitions.
Mm-hmm.
They all said yes, and they all understand the concept of what the word God is, but we're all seeing it from a totally different point of view. To be impeccable with the word. Sometimes we're impeccable with the word, sometimes we're not. Someone would say, to be impeccable with the word is to always say the truth. Well, here's the thing. Sometimes we say the truth with so much emotional poison that we're not being impeccable in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
To me, to be impeccable with the word is to not use my word to love myself conditionally, to give myself the ability to love myself unconditionally, to use the word to heal. So from my point of view, we heal with our own permission. Jose has a beautiful line, Don Jose, that says, in the total tradition, there's nothing to learn but to unlearn. Mm-hmm. For me, the essence of what it is that we unlearn, it is the thing that stops us from healing, the things that don't give us permission to heal. From that point of view, the work that we do is to continue to heal the individual, but not through a ceremony, but from becoming aware of the intent that we give to our words. I can destroy my world so easily by saying, I don't love you.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can heal my world so easily by saying, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
And the irony is that I can flip it and it has the same effect.
Yes.
I don't love you can be incredibly healing, and I love you can feel like a huge weight. There's some people who are completely afraid of that. And that's the flip. That's the distortion.
Mm-hmm.
How be impeccable with the word is equivalent to saying be impeccable with yourself, because it is your intent that gives power to your word. What is the intent we give? To heal, to help someone. Like my dad says, if I can do it, you can do it.
Right.
Well, I've used these teachings to heal myself from the wounds that conditional love left in my heart, but to heal the wounds that my ego and personal importance distorted all this time, and to know what respect truly is in my own life, which is simply to respect this being in its full capacity to live life as a unique individual, because it is the infinite possibility that it is. And at the same time, you honor the past.
And one of the things that needs healing, one of the things that allows us to move beyond, is this thing called attachment. It creates problems. You've written a book called The 5 Levels of Attachment.
5 Levels of Attachment, yes.
Let's talk about the power of attachment and why the need to let them go.
Well, an attachment is making something that's not a part of you a part of you by investing of yourself emotionally, intellectually, energetically to something. It's holding on to a moment that no longer exists. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
And one of the best ways to describe that is to attach myself to something through my identity. Based on the conversation we had before, I can identify myself as self.
Right.
Do you use knowledge, or does knowledge control you?
Right.
My grandmother's teachings. All right, I'm about to apply it. Level 1, the authentic self. Mind you, I just use the word authentic self just as a placeholder, just understanding that people will understand it from a unique point of view. But it's just simply the moment where I realize that I'm alive, regardless of what I think, regardless of what I know. I am here. I am.
You exist, and that's self-evident. Right?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't need knowledge to let me know that.
Right.
I don't need knowledge to get to know myself. I know myself through the experience of being me. And I'm the infinite possibility, because I can go in any direction from this point just as much as I'm the sum. The answer to my grandmother's question is, I don't control knowledge. I don't need knowledge in order to know me. I don't need to control knowledge. More importantly, actually, that's a much better way to phrase it. I'm aware. Level 2, preference. Imagine the infinite possibility. A flower you call awareness. It engages a moment, and when the moment's over, it disengages. Engage and disengage. Imagine a flower that pulsates with every moment it engages. At level 1, the flower is completely open. At level 2, it engages a moment and closes ever so briefly, but it opens up the moment it's no longer relevant. It disengages. Attach, detach, attach, detach. Knowledge from this point of view looks like this. I can see the infinite possibility. I'm going to say yes to that possibility and no to the rest of it. And I'm going to use knowledge as an instrument that is going to inform my choice, but I'm the one making the choice.
Right.
I engage a moment, and when the moment's over, I disengage. And that's the thing. An attachment from this point of view is completely healthy. There's nothing wrong with an attachment. It's actually a beautiful thing. What makes it unhealthy is that when the moment comes to let go, we can't.
Right. It defines the self.
Exactly, which is level 3, identity.
Right.
Like I said before, the best way to attach myself to a moment is to identify myself with it. That's how we can able to carry it from that moment. Like in a soccer game, when the referee blows his or her whistle to end the game, the way to carry that moment outside of those 90 minutes is to say we lost or we won. And I define myself by the shield of the game.
Right.
You can say it's a flower that encloses ever a little bit, but when it's the moment to let go, the flower does not open up again. It's trying to hold on to it.
It's not breathing.
Yeah.
At that point.
Which means the answer to my grandma's question is knowledge and I are one. I think, therefore I am. a certain point of view.
Right, exactly.
So the best way there, now mind you, at this point, my identity is not an instrument to create division. It is an instrument to simply honor. An identity is a beautiful thing. I can use it to honor where I come from, my preferences in life, my ethnicity, my culture, so many things. It's a beautiful thing to say the self.
Right.
From this point of view, the self is a beautiful thing because it's a word I'm going to use to describe to others who I am. So at level 1, I don't need to use the word self in order to know me. At level 2, I'm going to use the word self to describe me, but it's just for a brief moment. As soon as I describe it, it's no longer truth.
That's right.
At level 3, I'm going to carry that word self as this is who I am, even beyond that moment. Basically, it's the moment where I'm no longer truly present. I'm holding on to what was. And that's where suffering comes in.
Yes.
This is where attachment comes in. Suffering through attachment, Buddhism to a certain point of view.
Right.
That element of what Siddhartha saw. A lot of suffering comes with our inability to let go of that which is no longer true. To holding on to our dead.
And beyond.
And beyond. Level 4, internalization. This is where I corrupt the 4 agreements and turn it into the 4 conditions. Up to this point, the 4 agreements are just instruments. At level 1, I don't need the 4 agreements. I embody them.
Right.
I don't even need to put it in words. At level 2, I can read all these books, but this is my preference because it resonates with me. It explains it all right. At level 3, I identify myself as a Toltec because I practice the 4 agreements. At level 4, level 3, level 4, I now corrupt it with my domestication. Domestication is a system of reward and punishment by which we model the behavior of an individual. If I live up to an expectation, I'm worthy of a reward. If I fall short of that expectation, I'm worthy of the punishment.
Right.
And since we are emotional beings who experience the full spectrum of our emotions, that reward feels like love, which feels like acceptance. And the punishment feels like the lack thereof of love, which feels like rejection. That's the way we've learned conditional love. I love you if. I can only call myself a Toltec if I live up to the 4 agreements. And the telltale sign that I do is judging myself for taking things personal, judging myself for making an assumption, judging myself for the rest of it. It is the moment I corrupt the 4 agreements and turn it into the 4 conditions.
Right.
If you understand this concept, you can understand how we can corrupt Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, Jesus, Buddha, Siddhartha, Muhammad, psychology, psychiatry, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Exactly.
Humanity has created all these beautiful traditions to let go of conditional love and embrace unconditional love, but we're so used to domestication and conditioning that we'll corrupt anything.
Yes.
And in this example, I'll corrupt the word self. And I have to live up to the image of self.
That's right.
I'm going to use my identity as the model by which I condition myself. The answer to my grandmother's question, do you control knowledge or does knowledge control you? Knowledge gives me the rules by which I will live my life, especially the rules by which I love myself and others. And like you can already see, level 3 is the slippery slope to level 4 and level 5, fanaticism. The answer to my grandmother's question is knowledge has complete and total control of me. If it doesn't live up to expectation, it needs to be punished severely. It is a moment where I no longer see the humanity and the individual. At level 1, I can see not only the humanity, the divinity of every individual. At level 2, I can use language to describe what I see, the divinity, the humanity. In fact, that's how I explain level 1. I use language, which means I've been using level 2 all this time. At level 3, I identify myself. You can say it's that moment where I put on a mask. In the Toltec tradition, we use a lot of the imagery of the mask, which is just an old way of saying identity. My identity is my mask.
The outer robe of concealment, to use ancient Judeo-Christian language.
Exactly.
Right.
So at level 4, imagine a mask subjugating me, blinding me.
Right.
As you can say, at level 4, I don't see the humanity or the divinity. I see the personification of an idea I agree with or disagree with, which leads me to level 5, fanaticism. There is no chance that I will ever see divinity, let alone humanity, because all I see is a symbol. And if it's a symbol that you're with us, I will spare your life. If it's a symbol that you're against us, I have no problem killing you, because I'm not killing a human being. I'm killing the personification of something. I'm not killing a being at all.
No, let alone killing yourself. When you come to the recognition of what you're truly talking about, that which lies beyond the mask is the essential self. There is no other. That human being that you have objectified to that extent, not you personally, but when a fanatic does that, in the name of a symbol of what they consider to be righteousness and truth, we get sucked in. There's a lot of gravitas, a lot of power in that. And
it's why if you see blue, you're able to kill because you represent red or blue. It doesn't matter. You see, and that's just with in sports. You can see if you see a Yankee logo, if you're a Red Sox fan,
right, that's going to be a problem.
Versa,
right, sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a problem. If you see, religion, politics is a little bit more convoluted. So that's where suffering comes from in regards to our attachment. We're so attached that it blinds us to our own divinity. You can say that mask not only subjugates us at level 4, but it completely has complete and total control of my perception. It's a complete corruption of the tree of knowledge.
That's right.
So flip it around. At level 5, the tree of knowledge, all it can see is the mist that surrounds it. Tezcatlipocatl, the smoky mirror. It's so distorted, it can't see beyond the tips of its nose. But it has a moment of clarity. It has an aha moment that allows you to question, and you do question it. And all of a sudden, across the way, you see a tree of life. And you think you and the tree of life are separate. All you see is the tree of knowledge. You think that you are the tree of knowledge. In fact, you've been thinking you're the tree of knowledge all this time. But you had a little glimpse of the tree of life. And this is where the 4 agreements comes in and all these beautiful traditions to allow us to heal. A moment of clarity without any action is just a thought that passes in the wind. But a moment of clarity followed by action becomes a pivotal moment in our life. It is the moment where we begin the journey of self-healing. This is where the journey, you can say, takes on its life. It came from that moment of doubt. Is this the truth? A moment of clarity. To go from level 5 to level 4 is questioning. If you use the 4 agreements or the 5th agreement, is be skeptical but learn to listen. Is it the truth? If it survives your scrutiny, then you say yes. If it doesn't survive your scrutiny, then you say no.
Right.
But the ability to question allows us to break the cycle of the automatic yes and the automatic no, which is what gives power to fanaticism, that I let knowledge control it. To go from level 4 to level 3 is applying all these teachings, and not just the 4 agreements, the teachings of so many ancestors. That's what it's there. And all of a sudden, you think that the tree of knowledge is the truth. But as you heal it, the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, we are one, level 3. But then you take off the mask. To go from level 3 to level 2 is the moment you take off the mask, and that's when you become aware that the tree of knowledge was always just a reflection. It was only one tree. that takes us to level 1, I am.
And we could talk about that for another 6 weeks, you and I. As a student of Kabbalah, I am well aware of these metaphors and understandings, a reflection of something that we are creating in the world of action. This podcast is dedicated to the conversation about consciousness as it pertains to life. Your writings obviously reflect that as well. Consciousness applied in the world of action, through choice, through decision, through intention, through integrity, through impeccability. I'm curious to know how you now define consciousness.
Well, right now you can say I just told the story of the smoky mirror. I told the story of, from Kabbalah or of Judeo-Christian. Consciousness, you can say there's the awareness of wisdom, of being able to put into words that which you can see. So consciousness, now mind you, I'm using words
and symbols
to try to describe it.
Right. It's a trick question, I'll have you know.
Yeah, I know. It's something that conscious is the experience of being alive. But I'm just putting it into words, something that really has no need for words. The closest you can get to is I am. And even then only encapsulates but a part of it. At this moment in time, I am alive. I am here. I can tell you many stories of what happens after my last breath. I can tell you many stories of what happens between this breath and that last breath. I can tell you millions of stories of every breath I've had since my first breath to this breath. But the only breath that matters is this breath. And I could say the same for my heartbeat. Because at this moment, the relationship between the tonal and the nawal is here. This is my experience. This is my conscience. From that point of view, I can put 1,000 stories that can both be truth and an illusion. But at the same time, the only thing, it's kind of like the truth. Neil deGrasse Tyson has my favorite quote. The truth exists whether you believe in it or not. It doesn't need you for it to exist. A black hole is going to exist whether you proved it or not.
Right.
Let me add this other thing. This is my interpretation, my understanding. A belief only exists for as long as you say yes to it. As soon as you change that yes into a no, it ceases to exist, which means a belief needs me for it to exist. The truth doesn't need me, but my belief does. And that's the game.
That is the game. I loved your answer to the question. It's a mystery. We're all working, trying to figure it all out. That's why we have this podcast. I love what you brought to this conversation. I know light when I see it. Both you and your brother are bringing light to the planet. I want to thank you for not only your participation in the podcast, but this important aspect of the conversation of consciousness. It's much larger than this podcast. And of course, for your presence in general. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Mark, for the appreciate the opportunity and hope you have a lot of fun.
Be certain to tune in again to Expanding on Consciousness to become informed on the fascinating field of consciousness studies and its applications. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the guests and the host. They do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Monroe Institute. Expanding on Consciousness is underwritten and produced by the Monroe Institute, copyright 2023, and is broadcast by permission. Reproduction or redistribution without the express written consent of Monroe Institute is prohibited by law. For more information about Expanding on Consciousness, visit our website at monroeinstitute.org or connect with us on the socials. Thank you for listening.